Hey guys, Chris Jenkins here, and in this video I want to talk about what I love so much about drumming. In the previous video I talked about some of the less favorable elements, the things that I sort of dislike about drumming and just drumming as an endeavor, some of the downsides, the cons. I wanted to be realistic and critique the thing that I love so much. So in this video I'm going to talk about the things that I do love so much. So firstly, rhythm is what makes you dance, it's what makes you move. And even as a drummer who sat there on the stool playing, you're going to find that drummers are bobbing their head, getting into the music. That's something I feel myself, and obviously that's what the audience is going to dance to. Melody is super important and is generally what makes a song memorable, but rhythm is going to be what makes people move, and that is such a great feeling. As a drummer, I absolutely love it when I'm playing a live show or to an audience and you can see people moving, see people vibing, when you're in that pocket and you have that rhythm just driving the song forward. It's such a great feeling. I feel like it's such a primal element to music, and to really get your body moving simply off of what you're playing and a simple beat or a simple groove, it's just so unbelievably satisfying. I love seeing people dance to the rhythms I'm playing, and even when I'm just playing alone, when I'm really deep into a groove or just something feels really good, I'm gonna be moving and bobbing my head likewise. So that's just one of the most awesome things ever. Now the next thing would be the physicality of drumming. Now this was actually kind of one of the cons in my previous video that I stated, because it can be very tiring, it's a lot of physical exertion, but at the same time it's what I love so much about drumming as well. The ability to just move and to be able to hit things to make it sound good. I mean, it's so unbelievably satisfying. It's so unbelievably therapeutic, where maybe you're in a bad mood or you're angry, or even if you're happy and elated, to be able to lay into the drums and just bash cymbals, to hit toms hard. It's so satisfying. I'm sure some of you can relate, and I think it's probably one of the big intrigues of drumming. When you see a drummer really laying into it, it just looks satisfying, and believe me, it really is. Now the next one, which is one of the most important ones to me, is the freedom of expression. Of course, this is, I think, one of the common characteristics of every musical instrument, and one of the main beauties of music is that ability to express yourself non-verbally, but within a musical context, and sometimes that can speak louder than words. I think obviously this improves as your vocabulary builds and as you become more experienced and you have more licks and grooves at your arsenal. But I think you can really tell a story and convey the mood and what you're feeling and what's going in your head through the drums. I feel like it can say a lot when you're playing a really heavy halftime groove, like a lot of metal drummers, or even fast drumming, or even Latin drumming, for example, stuff that has a lot of rhythm, a lot of vibe. There's a happiness to it. There's just a lot of emotion that can be conveyed rhythmically. And I think it's really unique, because I think with melodic instruments, it can be sort of easier to convey because it's more explicit in terms of what you're conveying, and say the scales and the progressions, it kind of says it itself. But to be able to convey your emotion rhythmically is a really unique thing, and that's something I love. And the freedom, again, combined with the physicality of drumming, it's a really unique dynamic, and there's not a lot of instruments that I think are like that. And I think this relates to the fact that maybe I'm biased in this because I'm not super theoretical, but I kind of love that you don't have to learn a bunch of scales and things of that nature. It's not a super theoretical instrument where you have to be playing in key. It's just something you can simply lay into and start grooving along to, say, songs that you hear or rhythms that are in your head, ideas that are in your head. So it's really awesome to have that sort of accessibility and to just be able to start playing without having to pre-learn a bunch of, again, like scales and progressions and things like that. Now obviously you learn grooves, and different grooves give different feelings, but it's really satisfying to be able to put on essentially any song, especially ones that have very simple rhythms, things like pop songs, even funk. Most genres, to be honest, it's just not difficult to start playing along to, even if you don't play the exact same thing. I mean, that's why I love genres like hip hop and pop and playing to things like that, just because it's so easy to improvise. There's a lot of freedom, there's not a lot of set parts. It's easy to sort of delineate from what's already written and being played. So I just love that element of, again, freedom behind drums, because it's so easy to just explore different rhythms over pre-existing rhythms, again, without having to adhere to a set scale or something of that nature. I think this also relates to something else that I love about drumming, and that is just that the longer you play for, or the longer I've played for, I've found that my affinity and love for rhythms in general has obviously grown. So when I hear music, I'm a lot more in tune to what is happening and what that rhythm makes me feel and how it's conveying that and why it's making me feel that way or move that way. Understanding how things like certain subdivisions or triplets, for example, will drive a song and create a sense of rhythm compared to different time signatures or, again, subdivisions. It's just a really awesome thing, and to be able to just manufacture that, again, like, so just physically, is really cool. For example, if you're in a band setting or playing with other musicians, the ability to simply switch from a half-time feel to a double-time feel, or to switch it to a more triplet feel or a swung feel or a dotted rhythm, something that drags, like, the power in being able to simply change that feeling affects the entire band, the entire rhythm, groove of a song, the drive of it, how people move. There's so much power in that. The fact that you're able to make people move differently simply through the rhythms that you play, I think is just unbelievably profound. It's just made me have so much more appreciation and, again, an affinity for rhythms that I do hear. When I hear songs, I feel like I'm so much more aware of the rhythms and how it's making me feel, and I'm more likely to start like clicking or clapping or tapping the songs that I hear, because I'm so much more in tune with the rhythms. I'm someone who has developed a good sense of rhythm now from playing drums, and if you are a drummer, that's sort of the natural byproduct. So I just love that you build this natural affinity and love for rhythms, or at least a stronger one the longer you play drums. Now, another thing that I love, which I think is somewhat more specific to drumming just because there's so many more possibilities, is the range of different setups. You can play something so simple like a hi-hat, snare, kick drum, or even percussion type setups where there's no feet involved necessarily, or even huge setups where you have like 20 different cymbals, 10 different toms. There's such a range of setups, and there's really no limits. I mean, take Terry Bozzio, for example. I mean, his drum kit is quite set up to be a very melodic one. He probably has like 100 different cymbals with 100 different sizes, which all convey a different sound and, again, sort of pitch or expression. So there's just so much that you can do with drums. And I've mentioned this previously, how different setups will also spark different ideas. So that's such a cool element to drumming, because in some sense, it's not like you have to buy an entirely new instrument or a new amplifier. It's more of just simply adding a piece of material to your drum kit, which will change the sound and, again, thus change ideas or possibilities. I mean, even something as simple as dampening your snare can give you a completely different sound, maybe a more vintage sound, a dry sound, compared to the opposite. There's obviously what's become huge in recent years is like the fat snare drums, where it gives you that big, loud, punchy sound similar to like 80s drums. So there's just so many variations you can create with a drum set, and again, just the fact that that will then influence the ideas and what is expressed. It's just something that's never ending, and it's just awesome. I mean, it's so satisfying to have a row of toms and just a but at the same time, it's really fun to just play a simple setup and just make it groove, and to even be able to play complex things on a simple setup shows skill in itself, and will, again, actually teach you how to be more creative and skillful on a simple setup. So my point being, just the range of setups that are possible with drums. And relating to the physicality of drumming, it's not something where you necessarily have to have an entire drum set. You can tap on anything, and again, as most drummers have what is called drummer syndrome, you're going to find that you're just going to be tapping on everything around you, and especially when you hear music, it's really hard not to start playing along. And it's awesome that you can sort of exert that musicality and that expression that is inside you just through your hands and fingers, or even just feet. Or even something like beatboxing. It's really cool that it's so dynamic and that you're able to recreate a groove without having to have an entire instrument. So I love that about drums. You know, it makes me think about all those videos that you'd see of like school kids just tapping on their desk, making a beat, and then the next person comes in, maybe adds an element or even starts rapping over it or singing over it. There's just such a purity and simplicity to it that I absolutely love, and I just think it really relates to the sort of primal nature of drumming in general. Now, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure drumming has got to be the oldest sort of instrument. Again, it's just something that's so primal and within us. You think of war chants, you think of war drums, or even just people who are gathered around a campfire, playing rhythms and again dancing to them. It's just such a historical element, and I think a lot of that is even innate. You know, again, rhythms is just what makes you move, it's what makes you dance, and I just absolutely love that about drums. And lastly, to bring it to a more practical element, is that I feel like being a drummer is something that's not going to be near as saturated as something like being a guitarist or vocalist. There's obviously a lot of other instruments that are probably less saturated than drumming, but if you're a drummer, it's in a sense easier to be part of a band or to audition or sort of get spots where you are playing, and especially in live context, simply because there's not as many drummers as there are, again, guitarists, vocalists. When we're talking about the standard band, you're going to have maybe one or two guitarists, a bassist, singer, and a drummer. And drummers tend to be the ones that are sort of lacking. So that's why there's always the joke that every drummer's in like 5 different bands. It's just something that is really kind of optimistic if you are a drummer and want to do it as a career, because again, it's not as saturated and you'll probably get more opportunities. Whereas I think if you're a guitarist, and I wish I could play the guitar, but nevertheless, if you are a guitarist, it's going to be probably a lot more competitive in terms of getting into bands and getting performances, or maybe into music colleges where there's already 100 different guitarists. And yeah, if I had to sum it up, I mean, drums to me is just something that's so unbelievably therapeutic because it's physical, because you don't need much to convey a rhythm or express yourself rhythmically, musically. It's awesome. I love it, and I love that about drumming. All these things, I'm sure there's plenty more things I just haven't thought of at the moment. If you have any more ideas and things that you absolutely love about drums, please comment them below. It's so cool to hear different perspectives and what people love about drums, because, you know, some people like the more theoretical element of drums and how it's put together, how rhythms are created and why they do the things that they do, and some people are also more interested in like the gear side of things, the different types of woods, the different sizing, the different materials that affect the sound. There's also all those sorts of things. So, you know, there's definitely a lot more elements to drumming that creates a love for the instrument that, you know, just come from different perspectives. So if you have any other ideas or things that you love about drums, please do comment them below. I'd love to create more discussion around this. So if you love drums as well, please give the video a like. You can subscribe to see more videos. I'm happy to cover any topics that you want me to talk about, so just comment those below. And until then, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. If you know, you know.